Building off my last video where I discussed the issue with prophecies within D&D stories, today we will be discussing if you should kill your Dungeons & Dragons players. And the simple answer to this question is yes, of course you should kill them. That's part of the game. But in this video, I will be going into detail about why you should kill your D&D players and how you can write a story that can continue after player death. Let me say this first and foremost because it is extremely important to understand this before we continue. We never kill a player's character as a form of punishment to that player or to that character. You should never ever feel like you need to punish your player, and you should never ever kill their character for that reason. The reason we kill characters in D&D is simple. It is because it is part of the story that we are telling. You see, there are three elements to D&D storytelling. This is the Dungeon Master, the player, and the dice. And only two of these elements should ever decide if a character will die. The first of these is the player. This, as a dungeon master, should be out of our hands entirely, whether it is a self-sacrifice, poor decision-making, or a conscious decision to never yield. A player has the right to decide if their character's story is ending, and as a dungeon master, you should do nothing to interfere or change the outcome. If a character decides to teleport away from the party holding a bomb that will kill them all and all of the hostages as a last resort, they should have the right to do so. And we as dungeon masters may not want this to happen, but it is a character decision and no Deus Ex Machina should come in to save them from their choices. Or if a character decides that they want to go it alone in the woods of Barovia at night, they shouldn't be saved from the horde of zombies that come for their flesh. They knew the risks and must deal with the consequences of the world. Finally, if a character is a paladin trained from birth to vanquish evil, and they continue past enemies that they have no chance of defeating and land themselves in a room with the big bad evil guy at level 5, they will fight to the death. And that fight needs to play out to the death. The game of D&D is making a story that is decided by character decisions, and almost constantly those decisions can lead to instant death for the players. So to work around or avoid death would be a disservice to the game and would be an insult to your players. Because your players know that there's a chance that they will succeed, a chance decided by a 20-sided die that they roll every session. And the randomness of that dice and all of the other dice at the table is the second element that can decide if a character should die. An integral part of Dungeons & Dragons is the randomness that the dice brings to the game and the storytelling. Dice are what decides if a player makes that jump across a 1,000-foot high canyon. Dice are what decide if a player charms the guard to not raise the alarm and instead takes the bribe to turn a blind eye. Dice are what decide our stories, and they should be what decide if our players live or die. So I know you are sitting there, staring at the natural one your player just rolled on the Beholder's Death Ray, and you know that you can turn that into a slowing ray without them even knowing. But there is a reason the dice are there, and to change the result of a dice roll is to overstep your power as a dungeon master. Let the dice decide the player's fate and allow the story to play out how the universe decides it. That is the natural order of the game. And it is okay to allow your players to die, whether it be their choice or the dice. It is still part of the game, and if you write the game around player death, then it really shouldn't matter because there is always backup characters and there is still a story to be told. Now, since we are going to be letting our players die, we need to be sure that the story is suited for characters to leave and new ones to arrive at any moment. And these types of stories is what sets D&D apart from the rest. Because in most stories we experience, there are the main characters, and they are the focus and the center of everything that is happening. And for one of them to die, in most cases, would mean the end of the story. Imagine if Luke Skywalker rolled a natural one swinging across that gap in Star Wars. If he and Leia plummeted to their death, that would have been it. No one would have turned Vader back to the light, and no one would have stopped the Emperor from ruling the galaxy. But quickly, imagine if the story of Star Wars was Dungeons & Dragons. And Han and Chewbacca escaped, now the most wanted in the galaxy, joined up with the rebellion, and went on to lead armies against the Empire with an assortment of new friends and allies. That would be an interesting and unique direction for the story to go, that feels creative and natural. unlike the stories that we have been told before. And that is what D&D is. Unique stories that are unlike anything that we have experienced before, because they are our own, and they are decided not only by our thoughts, but the random outcomes of dice rolls. So, writing a D&D story about death is as simple as keeping an open mind and embracing the creative randomness of D&D itself. You have an idea of where you want this story to go, and it can continue in that direction, but the branching paths and the crazy scenarios that happen in D&D is what makes that story special. So embrace it and use it as a tool to tell the best story you possibly can. If a player falls in combat, make it memorable. Make it ingrained into the story that has conspired and weave it into the story to come. Don't forget about the story you're telling because the characters have died, but also don't be afraid to branch off in that new direction. This can be extremely difficult, and the only advice I can give to help harness skills such as these, other than simply keeping an open mind, is to take your favorite stories and imagine what they may look like if a character died halfway through. Explore those hypothetical scenarios and write them out as your own stories. Also, don't be afraid to rely on your players to help with the new story direction. This is their story too, and their thoughts and opinions and ideas should be considered, especially if it was their character that died. And all of this will surely come more naturally as long as you avoid stories revolving around prophecies, and you write worlds that don't revolve around your player's story. Writing a world that continues on after the death of your players is a crucial first step to any of this working the way it should. And if you watch my other videos, that should be pretty simple. You already have that done. So don't make your players the focal point of your world, and write in multiple avenues for other main characters to be formed from the world that you've written that will come to the aid of the party after the death of a member. And this new member can be decided upon by the will of the players, the world, or the randomness of the game. The key is to make it feel natural and to not gloss over the death of the character. Do not allow this new character to simply replace the last, but be a wholly new member of the adventuring party with their own story needed to be told. Thank you all again for watching Tips and Tutorials. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. And if you found any of this helpful, I would implore you to please share it with anyone that you know who plays D&D. I would love to help anyone and everyone have more fun playing games with their friends. And if you have any ideas for videos that you would like me to touch on, please feel free to put them down in the comments below. Or if you disagree with anything that I have said, please let me know, and I would like to be able to keep the conversation going so that we can all become better D&D players together. I think all sides should be heard. Goodbye, everyone.